Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18 Tarot and Books. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. Welcome. In this video, I want to share my approach this year for 2026 to working with a word of the year and a card of the year. I have taken up both a word of the year and card of the year for a number of years now. I have changed aspects of how I approach those at different points. This year I have very much changed how I'm approaching my card of the year. So I wanted to talk through that, and I thought that I would also in this video share my card of the year reading that I did for myself using a spread by my friend Luna over at Water Moon Cards. I will link below where you can find that spread. Before getting to that though, I want to ramble a little bit to give some context to this kind of shift. And I think that the big factor that has influenced my word of the year and by extension my card of the year is astrology. For folks who are just stumbling upon my channel now, who don't already know this, I have been studying astrology in a more serious way than I have prior for the last couple of years. And I'm really enjoying that. I feel like I've learned a lot. It is a practice that I get a lot of value from and that I really enjoy. And so inevitably around, the new year time, I am, like many others, looking at year ahead astrological forecasts and thinking about kind of major transits in the upcoming year and these kinds of dynamics that might reflect some of, what my year or what the year in a kind of more general societal sense might be like. And I'm thinking about these things not in a wholly deterministic way necessarily, but certainly when I'm thinking about, things like New Year's resolutions and intentions, which I will share in another video so that this one is not too long. I'm thinking about kind of working with the astrological weather and currents that exist as opposed to against it, insofar as my still what I would say is kind of beginner nudging into intermediate astrology understanding allows for me to do. So yeah, there's ways in which this has necessarily shaped my thinking. And one of the main timing techniques that I've come to really appreciate over the course of my astrological study is annual profections. And I've been working with these for a number of years as well. Very briefly, the idea of annual profections is that each year at one's solar return, or roughly one's birthday, a new place or house in the birth chart becomes activated. So when one is born, the first year of life from age 0 to 1, it is a first house or first place year. The second year of life is a second house year, and so on around the chart. And this means that, that area of the chart can become a particular focus in that given year. It also means looking with added emphasis at the ruler of that house in one's chart, and doing so both kind of natally and in terms of transits. So every house has a ruler, and that ruler is related to the sign that is found in that house. And I will maybe put a link below to a resource or two about annual profections so that I don't ramble on for too long. Anyway, my birthday is in very early March, And as a result of that timing, I feel like for me in practice, a lot of the time, things to do with my birthday, like annual perfections, for example, get kind of bound up with, for me, something like New Year's resolutions with the Gregorian calendar year. So in early March 2026, this year, I will be moving out of a third house year and into a fourth house year. I'm turning 39. And this then means, for me, that I am moving out of 2 years in a row of Saturn being the relevant ruler that I've been looking to looking to Jupiter, because my third house is Aquarius, which is of course ruled by Saturn, and my fourth then is Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter. And I'm thinking in terms of whole sign house system here. So one sign correlates to one house exactly. Obviously not all house systems work that way. Anyway, I am quite I'm quite looking forward to having some time with Jupiter after the last 2 years of Saturn. I will just say that, very much so. And Jupiter, of course, rules, my fourth house, which is Pisces, but that also means that Jupiter is my chart ruler because it's the ruler of my first house and my ascendant in Sagittarius. So Jupiter is a very personal planet for me in that sense, beyond it being activated as a Time Lord through annual perfections this year specifically. And so I'm thinking about this, and there's ways in which then the first house and the fourth house are kind of tied together for me as Jupiterian signs, but also my Jupiter natally in my birth chart falls in my fifth house. My natal Jupiter is in the first degree of Aries. In my fifth house I would associate with creative works, artistic works, and sex and sexuality, pleasure, sensual things, right, in the fifth house. And so that place is getting some extra emphasis by my natal Jupiter being there. This year, in terms of transits, Jupiter, not in my birth chart, but Jupiter in the sky, Jupiter for everyone, Jupiter as they're moving through the sky, Jupiter moves from Cancer to Leo about halfway through 2026, which means moving from my 8th house to my 9th. My 9th house of astrology, philosophy, travel, literally or metaphorically, philosophy. I think of all of these things as related to the 9th house. And there are eclipses in the 4th and 9th for me this year as well, because there's those eclipses in Pisces and in Leo. So, and that's in the latter half of the year as well. So the latter half of the year, that 9th house is has a lot going on for me. Meanwhile, my natal Jupiter in that, first degree of Aries in my 5th house is also going to be having a lot of interactions, as Saturn and Neptune both will be transiting between Pisces and Aries this year. They will conjoin my natal Jupiter in early Aries. And I've been thinking about that shift a lot. Both Saturn and Neptune moving together, is a very particular, I think, dynamic in terms of the kind of structure and boundaries and limiting of Saturn. Saturn's association with institutions and things like this, with Neptune, like murky, mysterious, fantastical Neptune. Those two together on my chart ruler in my 5th house of creativity feel really supportive in some ways of some of the things that I want to be doing in terms of my 5th house pursuits around exploring speculative fiction and artistic work and things like this. I feel like these transits in a general sense are not easy ones. And there's a lot astrologically, I think, about 2026 that is not easy. In a general sense, without taking anyone's birth chart into account, I think there's a lot about 2026 that is looking rough. But in terms of setting intentions for myself for this year, I'm really looking to that Jupiter that is going to be activated for me in Jupiter as a benefic, bringing expansiveness, in my ninth house in particular, but also this kind of dynamic in the fifth house. And that's what's inspiring me in terms of my word of the year in large part. So this year I have chosen for 2026 to have my word of the year be alignment. And I'm thinking about alignment in a couple of different ways. I think I'm first and foremost thinking about alignment in terms of being in the world in a way that is aligned with my values, is aligned with my personal philosophy, is aligned with my own politic, is aligned with an orientation towards justice, towards freedom, these things that are Sagittarius associated, certainly, and thinking about the ninth house has to do with philosophy and religion and these kinds of things that are very, very personal in terms of how one sees the world. So I'm thinking about alignment there. I'm also thinking of alignment as a druid in terms of alignment with the seasons, alignment with nature, alignment with the cycles of the planets as I continue my study in that direction, and alignment with within my daily life. I want to think about the different areas of curiosity and inquiry and practice for me, whether that's my druid practice or my divinatory practice, my tarot practice, my astrology practice, my creative practice as a aspiring writer, my reading practice, my practice of being a YouTuber, sporadic though it has been. I want to think about all of these things in an aligned way, in the sense of ensuring, as much as I can, that these are all mutually supportive and aligned again with my views is maybe too brief. Aligned with the kind of life that I want, aligned with the kind of principles that inform and guide how I live in the world. I want to think about all those things together. And I feel like, with the fifth house, Jupiter, that can be a lot of experimenting. That can be very creative. That can be, very generative. By no means do I think of alignment with principles as inherently rigid, right? I think that kind of experimentation and kind of prefigurative politics and, trying out new ways of living with other people and doing things in the world, like that is a value as well. So that is my word of the year. And I'll share again in another video the specific New Year's intentions or New Year's resolutions that I've made. I ended up making some intentions in a couple of different areas, which is what I usually do. This year being druidry practice, divinatory practice, reading practice, and YouTube. So I'll share those later. But I want to share my card of the year and what I've done with my card of the year, because this year I decided, in alignment with the word alignment and in alignment with, what I'm increasingly thinking of as an ascendant, a Jupiter, a chart ruler, in a personal philosophical orientation towards agency and towards freedom, I decided to just pick a card of the year. I didn't shuffle. I didn't do any math, adding up my birthday and the 2026 of 26. Both of those are things that I have done. Last year I shuffled a majors only deck and drew a card of the year that way. But this year I am choosing. And the fact that I've chosen my card like in a like face up way, like not randomized, I picked the one I wanted, is I think reflexive of a shift in how I'm thinking about card of the year this year. I feel like with all of my studies in astrology that drawing one card as a reflection of kind of how my year will go makes less sense to me at this point, which is not to say I think it's a bad practice or somebody else shouldn't do it, but I think that I'm already doing a lot of kinds of forecasting about what kind of year it's going to be, you know, not just with astrology, but I do kind of season ahead geomancy forecasting as well. So picking that one card at the beginning of the year just I didn't feel like it was going to add something. So instead I'm approaching that card as more of a talisman or a guiding star, something to orient towards in the context of, you know, the year that I have and my intentions and thinking about alignment and all of those things. And it felt a little weird initially to do this, but now that I have done it, it feels really good. You know, choosing what I want to kind of refract my thinking through, for lack of better language, has felt really good. The card of the year that I have chosen for myself for 2026 is Temperance. And this is the Temperance card from the Mindscapes Tarot by John Rice. I chose the card Temperance you know, in a more general sense. I didn't pick this specific Temperance artwork. I'm choosing Temperance as a major, right? Regardless of deck. And there's a couple of reasons why I'm choosing Temperance for this year. One, you know, that doesn't hurt, I guess, but isn't the main motivating factor necessarily, is that Temperance is associated with Sagittarius. So associated with the sign of my ascendant, from which my chart ruler Jupiter, which is also my Time Lord this year, is derived. Thinking in terms of alignment with my own outlook and my own values, you know, that very personal first house becomes very important to me. But I actually don't read tarot with astrological correspondences. so I, you know, thank you, John Rice, for having the Sagittarius right there, because that's helpful for those of us who don't work with this so much. That part doesn't hurt. But Temperance, to me, I'm thinking in terms of a kind of alchemy, a kind of experimentation, a kind of taking what one has and putting it, you know, along with other things one has. And one has here, I'm thinking in terms of like skills and capacities and interests and passions, and putting those together in, you know, experimental and creative ways in service of experimenting towards liberation, towards social justice, towards, you know, living in an aligned way for myself. So I feel like the Temperance card nicely works with some of the astrological, you know, factors that are prominent for me in the coming year. I also think that it is a good reminder for me to think about, you know, how the things that I'm doing and how these different interests that I have that I'm making resolutions around and so on, like how those things work together, how they might work together differently, how they might inform each other in different ways. As I'm particularly thinking through some of this kind of fifth house, early fifth house, first degree of Aries, shifts that are happening there for me, thinking in terms of that relationship between Saturn and Neptune that are both kind of in that area, and the possibilities there around things like, fantasy and science fiction as, sites of particular kinds of experimentation with political implications that I'm very interested in exploring. Right? So this fits in a lot of different ways. And, there's obviously a number of different cards that I could have picked. There's 22 of them, in fact, that, in years to come, maybe I will do this again. But somehow this one felt really like the right one for me. So I'm excited to see where this goes. And with that, I want to share my card of the year reading that I did for myself very briefly. And again, I'll link below where you can find that spread from my friend Luna. She has a blog post with all the spread positions and that, and also a video kind of walking through it. I did something that I don't usually do with this and just chose one card for each position. Most of the time when I'm reading in a spread, I do pick more than one, but I wanted to pick just one this time. So the spread has 4 prompts, and I have things written down here. So the 4 prompts are: what aspect or energy of the card is likely to be most dominant in the coming year? How can I best work with that? What obstacle is likely to come up with regard to this particular card of the year? And how can I best navigate that obstacle? So it's a spread that assumes you have already identified your card of the year in whatever way that you do that, which I did. And I did a little bit of writing about temperance very briefly, just noting, with my focus on aligning, temperance feels apt in alchemical themes, shifting combinations yielding magic, transformation of self in alignment with ideals, discernment about proportions and effects of me on my environment, for example. Associated with Sagittarius and therefore Jupiter, aligning with my annual perfections. And I chose one card for each position from the Naturescapes Tarot, one of my absolute all-time favorite decks. And I'll share with you what I got. So the first one, what aspect or energy of the card is likely to be most dominant? I got the 10 of Wands. So the most fire possible. Lots of fire there. I feel like, were this in the obstacle, I would think it was like risk of burnout kind of thing. Mostly I'm looking at this in terms of its kind of bigness, for lack of better language. Like 10 of Wands is big fire, big passion, right? As an area that could mean particular kind of emphasis on the more fiery aspects of my intentions, creative work, for example, as opposed to more airy or watery foci, for example. So I think too that, 10 can also be too much, right? There's a possibility of overwhelm, certainly. Trying to, be really intentional about a lot of things simultaneously, all of which are cared about, right? So I'm curious to see how this will come up. 10 of Wands. How can I best work with 10 of Wands? And the second card I drew actually kind of helped me clarify this first one a little bit. How can I best work with that aspect of the card of temperance likely to be dominant? And I got the World card, which I think is an interesting one. I feel like this, of how to work with this, the World, is a nudge to not lose kind of holistic, big picture thinking and get too mired in the granular. I just finished reading Tom Benjamin's book, The Modern Fortune Teller's Field Guide, and something he mentions in there with the minors is the idea of this kind of division over the course of the minors where you have a 1 in the ace that then divides and divides and divides and divides and kind of proliferates into a bigger number, right? Into, in this case, 10. I feel like, you know, having a, oh, that's backwards, sorry. Having a lot is good, but making sure to not lose the big picture focus of like how things go together and are interconnected, and those kind of web like aspects is going to be how I work best. I do think there's a risk of that, you know, getting compartmentalized in ways that thinking about alignment is not exactly what I want to be doing, right? Thinking about different aspects of my life and my practice and my relationship with my environment and all of these things as being in alignment, I think there could be for me a risk of then thinking about them all as very different and separate and trying to figure out how to calibrate them together. And that's not, that would not be a good description of what I want to be doing. So I feel like the World card also has to do with staying really grounded in the living earth, in the sacred earth as a druid, you know, that whole center of my practice. That's how I best work with. What obstacle is likely to come up? I got the 4 of Swords. And the 4 of Swords as an obstacle with something like alignment, I feel like could be something like the kind of analysis paralysis, like getting really stuck mentally for an air, getting really stuck in a kind of overthinking, getting stuck in thinking in a more rigid way than what I want to be. 4 of Swords often as well, you know, might speak to something like boundaries to me and like what, you know, how am I thinking about boundaries between these kinds of aspects of my life? What does that mean? Am I thinking too rigidly? That could be an obstacle, certainly. I think about temperance, like thinking about temperance and alignment together. Like to me, the alignment of temperance is always moving, right? It's a kind of readjustment and reorientation and you know, constant kind of navigation of things. It's not a final state, right? It's not like, oh, this is balance and now you've attained balance and now that's it, right? It's not that. It's something quite different than that. And so I think this is avoiding that kind of rigidity for sure. I also think, and I don't know if this is, again, tarot astrological correspondences are not my my area. I don't know them well. 4 of Swords, just in how I read a 4 of Swords card, makes me think of Saturn making its way right near where my chart ruler Jupiter lives in my chart, and coming in with that structure and coming in with that, you know, it can be a reality check. I was in a kind of class session that my Druid Order AODA is offering, a monthly astrology session, and Saturn-Jupiter combo came up as metered growth, right? It's like Saturn is not bad and Jupiter good in this context, but together, like this feels, this could be self-limiting thinking, like this could be all kinds of things, but it definitely is a mental obstacle, I think. And how do I best navigate that obstacle? The last position, 3 of Cups. I best navigate any obstacle, I think, that I come up against in this year or in general, in community, in supportive community contexts that that sustain, you know, that we each sustain ourselves through this kind of community context, right? With the support of friends, with the support of loved ones. And so I'll be thinking about that. Incidentally, community is also a very big theme in my chart, in that my midheaven actually falls in the 11th house. You know, and there's some other things there as well that speak to, you you know, the importance of community and of kind of co-conspirators and, you know, creative circles and things like that. So that's what I'm thinking of as my best way to navigate this kind of potentially overthinking or over rigid or self-limiting kind of an obstacle that could come up this year is in community with others. So that is my card of the year reading. Thank you so much for watching. If you have a card of the year this year or a word of the year this year, I would love to hear about it. Let me know in the comments. If you've tried this spread or plan to, let me know in the comments. And I wish you a very good 2026. See you soon.